first design of the Reaper. I originally had this idea for when I was pitching I Am Legend to Warner's, and the idea that the jaw was a negative space, that the jaw opened. This was inspired by two or three things. The idea that, like a snake, the jaw could accommodate a larger bite. So we articulated like an insect's bite. But it came from many places. It came from a book from 1700s, a treatise on vampires. This book is actually the first English edition and done in the 1700s. And it's the first treatise published in the English language about vampirism. And what they said is that some of the vampires in Eastern Europe have a stinger that comes out of the mouth and from under the tongue and protrudes out. So way early, before I even knew Blade 2 was in the horizon, or even Blade 1, I did a sketch. This is the first idea I had for the stinger in the mouth. You know, that just, it came out and extended out of the tip of the mouth. You can see other biological ideas for vampirism. This is the nictating membrane over the eye that closed. And I had this idea that the wings, sort of bat wings, would be folded in the arm. And the other place where it comes from is I saw a photograph of a shotgun victim. All this had disappeared, and it was a negative space, and I found it shocking. You know, in that case, I felt a lot of compassion and pain, but I also felt that if you applied it for another purpose, it would be quite an act of magic, and to create a makeup that actually took away. Because normally with makeup effects, you add layers of skin, fake latex or silicone, but to remove is very hard. So those were the ideas behind the Reapers on Blade. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by anatomy. I had all the model kits: Visible Man, Visible Woman, Visible Frog, the Visible Wasp. And at some point I was really intrigued by the fact that no one had done the anatomy of fantasy creatures, you know? So as a kid I used to draw detailed anatomies for the creatures. You know, I was very curious about how a dragon would create fire. What would be the science behind it? And I did at one point a drawing of a gnome. You know, this was a dissection of a gnome. And I think you can notice it actually inspired a lot of the sort of flamboyance of the organs inside of the Reaper. Sort of ridges of wart-like appendages and, you know, all the stuff that is more deep sea life, like crinoid creatures or anemone and stuff like that. When I came on board Blade 2, I figured out the whole cycle of the vampire. I would use it again and figure it out much further on the strain, because I wanted an explanation on how they work, the biology. And David found really nice ways to incorporate it in the screenplay, but I had it all figured out in my head. Why their blood needed to be X color. I wanted it to be white originally, because my thought was that they really depleted of red cells very fast. I didn't do it on this one, but it's in the strain if you watch. For the violence in Blade 2, I knew that I wanted very much to do anime style of violence. So there was one moment which is very typical in the anime, ninja, samurai action, which is slicing the enemy in two from the crotch up. wanted the violence to be balletic, to be almost like a musical number. So it would not have the yuck factor and the empathy factor. Violence, like in Devil's Backbone or Pan's Labyrinth, is really provocative because it's empathic and it hurts. On Blade 2, it was so outlandish that it was played like a cartoon or like a comedy, and I tried to insert little cues of that and clues of that in the movie. It's not violence that anyone can emulate, really, in any way. And when we did the planning for example, the fight scene in front of the Godlights, that was planned like a dance number. It's very much like choreography, like you would be watching somebody dance, very wide shots, moving shots, not a lot of cutting. I knew also that the fights on Blade 2, I wanted to cut very little. I didn't want to make it this super fast, jump cut, change the axis, don't know where you are kind of action. I wanted it to be as classically martial arts as possible. So you see the beats, you see 6, 7 beats of action in medium or wide, maybe cutting between a really wide and a medium, not make it crazy cutting. Just really cut very conservatively to showcase the actors. Now, I needed to cut as much as I cut because we were using 2 body doubles for Wesley, and we were using body doubles for all the other vampires. And, it was very difficult. If you don't cut, there's no way to fool the eye. But other than that, it was done anime/musical style. Architecturally, there are several styles on Blade 2. The architecture of Blade's place is dictated by an industrial look that Norrington established on the first movie. The only difference is lighting it with a more hard edge light, chiaroscuro. The clues we took from Stevens' first film. When I was in Japan, I made a note of an underpass, and this underpass was made of concrete and very diagonal shapes. And I was very intrigued by the fact that it looked very beautiful repeating those lines. I decided to use it on Blade 2 for the vampire buildings because I wanted to juxtapose sort of the really angular lines with the old architecture in the city and the Gothic shape of the sewers. And the fact that within those walls there was an ancient structure where Damaskinos lived. Now that's my least favorite set in the movie. I think that we didn't have time to light it right. I don't think we had a budget to build it right. To this day, I'm not happy with that set. But the idea was that the doors would open, very modern concrete architecture, and you reveal this Dark Ages little castle inside, like a chapel. I don't think it's quite there, but we tried our best with that. So this is the sewer area. And what we did is we did an excursion to the sewers of the Prague and Blade, and we discovered that the shape of them was very organic. They looked round and soft and almost uterine. They really didn't have the hard edges of modern sewers. They were very much like a piece of architecture by Gaudí. So we took those few clues and we multiplied them all around. The sewers have a womb-like feel, arches and domes. That was in sharp contrast with the vampiric technology. I wanted Nomak to have the feeling of a medieval hunter or a prince with the hoodie and something that looked like between a derelict and a hunter, or something really primitive. And the environment needed to be, again, going back to the Dark Ages. So the sewers have a very different look.